Chapter 38 Rhea switches to coy wife mode. By the time they finished their little interlude and took a shower before leaving the hotel, it was already 5:30. Late spring hadn't quite turned to early summer yet, so the evenings weren't as long as they would be in midsummer. Once the sun fully sank below the horizon, the sky's shades of blue grew deeper, and streetlights along both sides of the Student District Road began to glow. At that hour, even those students busy with after-school club activities were mostly home. If the pair were to waltz in through the main gate now, they'd almost certainly be stopped and questioned by security. But for both Kane and Reyes, such a minor problem was no problem at all. Hold it, you two, what's going on here? Are you Kuo Academy students? Show me your student IDs. Second year, third year, right? Showing up so late, where were you? Sign your names on this form, and you can go in. At the gatehouse, Boke accepted the form from the guard and scribbled his name. He handed it back and turned to the red-headed girl at his side, shrugging. All right, let's go. No more words were exchanged. With her fingers laced behind her back in a girlish posture, Reyes nodded gently and walked in with Boke. They proceeded about 10 meters. After passing the big Kuo Academy stone monument near the entrance, Reyes, who had been maintaining a dignified aura, leaned closer, nudging the boy's arm with her shoulder. Boke, help support me a bit. Oh, of course he wouldn't refuse such a small request. He took hold of Reyes's offered hand. Their fingers entwined, causing her already soft, affectionate features to redden a little more. You know, if you're that worn out, you could just use a magic circle to teleport, Boke remarked with mild exasperation. Though Reyes, as an high-class devil, had strong vitality and recovered quickly, even from a certain first-time experience, it wasn't like she could bounce back from that kind of physical exhaustion as fast as he could. Boke was practically an infinite endurance war god, a perfect hexagonal stat monster. There was no comparing the two. She was obviously so tired her legs were wobbly, yet she still insisted on walking all the way back. Honestly, that won't do. Reyes pouted, accentuating her dissatisfaction, then gave his hand a firmer squeeze, like she was worried he'd slip away. Teleportation's convenient, sure, but then we'd lose this leisurely feeling of walking back together. Or is it that you're already sick of hanging around with me? She spun slightly, aiming her pale green eyes up at him. Boke! The conversation had shifted in the blink of an eye. 1 second he'd been suggesting a quick way home for her weary self. The next she was implying he might be tired of her altogether. I'm just kidding. Seeing Boke fall silent for a couple of seconds, Reyes burst out laughing, waving one hand apologetically. Though, walking back is a bit of a slog right now, but I like the process. You're taking me back to the old schoolhouse, and then you have to head home, right? Boke blinked, acknowledging it was indeed getting late. Once he dropped Reyes off, he'd have to dash back to his own house. If he got home too late, Kuroko would undoubtedly throw a fit. Oh, actually, that reminds me of something, Reyes said, the idea sparking from her own remark. She blinked in realization, a little ding moment. What if? Actually, Boke, you told me you live alone, right? So how about moving into the school dorm instead? Then you wouldn't have to go home. I'm sure Aquino and Asia would be thrilled to. That probably won't work. Boke's mouth gave a faint twitch. There was something intangible in his voice. Luckily, he'd already prepared the perfect excuse. There's a lot of stuff at my place. If I move over here, there won't be space for it all. Letting it go to waste would be a shame. And besides, he didn't live alone. The other occupant in his house might not be a human. But if he promised Reyes he'd move in, Kuroko would definitely break into Ray's hell. No, thanks. I see, what a pity. Without masking her look of disappointment, Reyes drew a bit closer and rested her head gently on Boke's shoulder. But we could always. Her voice trailed off, her face carrying a slight longing. She seemed to have thought of something. We could always what? Noticing her sudden silence, Boke pressed curiously, but she only shook her head, wearing a mysterious yet expectant smile. Nothing, just a minor daydream. Don't mind it, right? You say that, but now I can't exactly ignore it. Boke sighed inwardly. From the main gate to the old schoolhouse, The route wasn't that long nor very short. After another few minutes, the building's silhouette came into view, prompting them both to halt. "I won't go in," Boke said. Rias nodded softly. They were about to part, and to say there was no reluctance would be a lie. But she'd left Aquino with a casual mention that she was just going out for a walk alone. Returning with Boke would definitely raise questions. Eventually, sure, the details about her and Boke and her break with the Phoenix family would all have to come out, but not tonight. "All right, guess this is it then. Boke, thanks for bringing me back. See you tomorrow." With that, Rias turned, stepping in close. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his, arms around him for 2 or 3 seconds, just long enough to be more than a peck, yet short enough not to be a drawn-out kiss. Then she pulled away, cheeks red. "Text me once you're home safe, okay?" She was definitely more proactive compared to before, even a tad more assertive. "Sure." Right as Boke was about to agree, Rias unexpectedly repeated her motion, this time kissing him more passionately, speaking a bit breathlessly. "This is for tonight. Since you won't be here later, I'm sort of claiming it in advance." A rosy flush swept her face, though she still wore that righteous little princess expression as she backed away. But what she failed to notice was that, just seconds earlier, a second-floor window, presumed closed, was discreetly open from within. Someone had parted the curtains to watch. Chapter 39, I Feel So Awful, Meow. Scene shift at home. In the entryway stood Kuroka, her expression signaling an impending mental blowout. Both hands clenched in a fist, arms hanging straight down in front, and beneath her loose-fitting kimono was a round, curvy backside arched just slightly. Where her 2 black cat tails usually swung playfully, they now stood rigidly angled upward at 60 degrees, like a pair of exclamation marks. "Arg, Boke, you've got another woman scent on you today, and it's super strong. Hurry up and explain. Did you hook up with some sneaky stray cat out there?" She looked exactly, no, literally, like a cat with fur on end. And this time, unlike when she'd guessed incorrectly about Seiko, she had it right on the nose. "Yeah, well, something did happen." Changing his shoes at the door and slipping into house slippers, Boke Keycane stretched out both arms and scooped up the cat-eared girl. Skin brushed skin, their scents intermingled. A second earlier, she was baring fangs. Now Kuroka let out a soft mewl and instantly fell quiet. Boke had planned to keep explaining, but her abrupt silence took him by surprise. He glanced at Kuroka, who was also looking down at him, cheeks flushed, biting her lower lip. Her gorgeous golden eyes brimmed with watery longing. "Are you turned on again?" After this many times, even Boke, normally a bit dense, had figured out by now. Kuroka gave a small nod. Boke was astonished. "Seriously? We just spent the whole weekend doing stuff. And this morning you were complaining your back still hurt. So what if it hurts, meow?" Her face turned scarlet as she grumbled in defense. "It was sore earlier, but when you suddenly picked me up, hugging my butt, I got a surge all at once, meow." "Enough talk. I feel so awful, meow, hurry." Feeling her body squirm restlessly with renewed desire, Boke mentally shrugged. Looks like they'd be bathing before dinner again. As he'd told Rias in the hotel earlier, with his near-limitless endurance, an hour or 2 straight was nothing. Even going 100 hours wouldn't tire him one bit. Time slipped away. About 2 hours later, by the time the clock on the wall of the living room was inching toward 8, the commotion in the bathroom finally died down. Soaking in the tub after a string of intense mountain summits, Kuroka slumped limply against Boke's chest, her long legs curled up, as if trying to fold herself into a small ball, and the cattails that had stood stiff as rods now lay obediently coiled at her side. After resting for a while, regaining a little energy, Kuroka abruptly shifted, turning to face him at a slight angle, something more convenient for conversation. Eyes half-lidded, she mumbled, "Hey, so you still haven't told me. Which stray cat were you messing around with this time?" It was a lot gentler in tone now that she'd been fed. Boke hesitated a moment, choosing a more diplomatic explanation. "It started near the end of today's last period. Aquino suddenly messaged me that Rias was feeling under the weather, so club was canceled. That rich redhead. Kuroka, who had been lying limp and unmotivated a moment ago, bolted upright in shock. But she immediately recognized she'd overreacted, so she eased back down, pressing her reverse twin peaks against the water surface. Go on. Boke didn't waste time. In a minute or two, he recounted all that had happened. Kuroka listened blankly, then rolled her eyes and gave a heavy sigh. Knew it. Figured it'd be that sort of reason. You always go soft about these things. I wouldn't say soft. I just hate having regrets. That's all. Boke shook his head. Like when you're being hunted by those devils. If I'd done nothing, they would have caught you. I'd have suffered no real harm, but maybe afterward, I'd look back and regret not helping. Wonder what might have happened if I had. Then I'd torment myself with that thought. So if doing nothing is guaranteed to make me regret it later, I'd rather pick the other path. And so far, that's always proved right, just like us right now. As he spoke, he lowered his gaze to meet Kuroka's in midair, right as she lifted her head, lips parted as if to say something. Recalling the origin of their relationship, Kuroka's thoughts returned to that first encounter. Her golden eyes, already misty with emotion, held an extra layer of gentle affection. Meow, we sure were back then. She lay on Boke's chest, tracing circles with her fingertip. So you're going to fight for someone else again, right? Pretty much. Boke's tone was casual. In his mind, the moment he kissed Rias in front of Graphia, his choice was made. He might have to head off to the underworld, but big deal. All right, then I'll go with you. Kuroka chirped suddenly, perking up, a sly grin on her face. That threw Boke off guard. Sure, if it came down to dealing with the Gremory Phoenix dispute, they'd probably head to the underworld to settle it. But that would mean him and Rias's group. Kuroka was an extra. And let's not forget Chiron would be there. That's probably not necessary. Just a quick trip to the underworld, right? Won't take more than a few days. Kuroka gave an indignant pout. So you plan to leave me here at home alone for days with no call or text? Why did that ring so familiar? Like some universal line all girlfriends used. I was just being logical. Boke realized with a sigh. They always turn it into a "you don't care about me" interrogation. No wonder people say, never try to reason with a woman. He changed tactics to be practical again. But if Chiron is there, what do you intend to do? Kuroka tapped her lip, pretending to think earnestly. Then she flashed him a peace sign and gave a mischievous wink. As long as I don't get dragged into the battle, I can handle things just fine, meow. Chapter 40 Surzex, Lucifer. Human knights are just as knights in the underworld. While Boke Kane was still busy back home dealing with a certain catgirl's intimacy crisis, events were simultaneously unfolding in the Gremory family territory of the underworld. With a dull thunk, the ground trembled lightly as the castle's grand gate slowly swung open. A crimson carpet stretched from the main entrance all the way inside, flanked on either side by 36 towering Roman columns. From a giant golden chandelier suspended high above the vaulted ceiling, bright lighting poured down, bathing the entire hall in a lavish radiance of gold. On either side of the carpet stood a line of identically uniformed maids, hands clasped in front, heads bowed in silent deference. Standing in the middle of the carpet itself was a gentle-looking, shapely brunette woman. Everything looked as if they were welcoming home a triumphant lord. And sure enough, once the castle gates fully opened, a tall figure came into view outside, striding onto the red carpet. Draped over his shoulders was a black cloak signifying his rank as a Satan, its edges rising slightly in the breeze, while his own red hair and handsome features bore a striking resemblance to Rias, about 70% similar. He proceeded along the carpet to where the brunette woman stood, pausing before her and lowering his head with a gracious smile. "I'm back, mother. Welcome home, Surzex. We've all been waiting a long time." The brown-haired woman smiled, too. Wearing a formal evening gown with long gloves, she reached out and patted her son's waist, not caring at all about the presence of so many onlookers. "Oh, dear Surzex, you look even thinner than you did last time. Is the workload of a Satan so exhausting? Any more of this, and I'll be worried sick." "Yeah, bit." Surzex squinted in a wry chuckle. "I'm still early in my reign, so there are tons of things I have to handle personally. Once we get through this period, it should ease up. Once this period is over, it'll get better. Is it? Venelana pursed her lips, displeased. You said the same thing last year, and the year before that. It's been how many years since you took over? Keep this up, and I'll be worried to death. If it's truly that difficult, you might as well quit being Satan. That's probably a bit extreme, Surzex replied with a laugh. He knew full well his mother's chiding came from genuine concern. He also knew those were only words. Venelana had been single-handedly supporting the Gremory household ever since her husband's passing. Surzex himself was away dealing with official duties as a Satan, and his little sister, Rias, was studying in the human world. Venelana had endured years alone under this ancient roof. For that reason, Surzex felt he had to cement his standing as king, ensuring Gremory retained its rank among the 72 pillars. The pillars themselves were no monolith. Countless undercurrents of ambition and greed lurked in the shadows, probably watching Gremory territory for the slightest chance to pounce. Surzex, being the last remaining male heir of Gremory, would never allow that. Lady Venelana, a voice sounded from behind them. Turning, they saw a maid bowing respectfully. Dinner is prepared and may begin any time. Thank you, Venelana said with a nod, then turned again to her son. So, Surzex, you've come back alone this time? Where are the others? He sighed with mild helplessness. There was no helping it. Everyone else is still busy, so I returned by myself. I see, Venelana murmured, some disappointment creeping into her tone. It was no wonder, since her husband's death, the household had been nearly devoid of inhabitants. Her son was forever weighed down by his official duties, and her daughter was off in the human world. She hadn't had more than 2 people at the dinner table in ages. Even so, at least her son was home this time. Putting on a brave smile, Venelana brightened her expression again. Anyway, you're home now. Let's not just stand here talking. Come on in and eat. You must be hungry coming back so late. I'm a bit hungry, Surzex admitted with a matching smile. Only in front of the mother who had raised him from childhood could he let go of the Satan facade. Scene shift, the castle dining room. In keeping with the castle's grandeur, the dining space was likewise impressive, enough to seat dozens at a huge table. Tall gold candlesticks with flickering red candles cast a stately glow. One could imagine how lively the Gremory household might have been in its heyday. But now, at that table stretching over 10 meters, only 2 seats were in use, mother and son. Venelana stirred her spoon in the hot soup, sipping a bit. I suppose it's nearing summertime in the human world, yes? Another couple months, then Rias's summer break will start and she'll come home. That's true. Surzex paused and set his silver spoon down, turning toward his mother. Mother, do you still recall the engagement Rias has with the Phoenix family? I remember. Venelana's gentle smile receded a little. Yes, it may be for the sake of Gremory's continuity, but it's the one mistake your father made in his lifetime. I've heard that third son in Phoenix family is a complete playboy, arrogant and haughty. Knowing Rias, she'll never take to him. If it really comes to that, Surzex, you... Naturally, he answered calmly, as if to reassure her. In truth, part of why I came back this time was to discuss the matter with you. I already sent Grafia to the human world to sound out Rias's feelings. If Rias truly can't stand that fiancé, I, as her brother, certainly won't let her suffer. Oh, that's such a relief. Venelana let out a small sigh of relief, a smile returning. But before she could continue, a red teleportation sigil suddenly flared at the dining room doorway. The shape of a silver-haired maid emerged from its glow. Lord Surzex, Lady Venelana. She bowed politely, addressing them from a distance. Grafia-chan. Venelana's eyebrows rose in mild surprise, but also a trace of delight. Possibly it was just happenstance, but if Grafia had arrived now, it meant there'd be a third person to accompany her for dinner. Surzex, however, looked more as if this were expected. So, Grafia, did my sister make up her mind? Lord Surzex, your sister did indeed come to a decision. However, the silver-haired maid, usually so composed and professional, found herself stumbling for words. However, even without details, Surzex's intuition told him something beyond his expectations must have happened. Chapter 41. Your sister got done, and she was the one who took the initiative. Grafia, no, more accurately, perfect-made Grafia, faced the greatest crisis of her career as a devoted servant today. As the queen among the retainers of Surzex Lucifer, one of the four great Satans, Grafia's competence was widely recognized. Whether it was managing family affairs, ensuring everything ran smoothly, or leading other servants in annihilating enemy forces, she could do it all flawlessly. Yet today, such an all-capable, near-perfect maid found herself flummoxed by the simplest of tasks, delivering a message. Especially for someone with real professional pride and a decent sense of propriety, Grafia might have been able to keep a calm demeanor and silently stand witness to that entire scene. But retelling every detail afterward with the same composure, that was another story altogether. In the end, Grafia still forced herself to do so. And the one who had to listen, just as reluctantly, was a certain young Satan who shall remain unnamed. Truly, in every sense, it was a bombshell. Even though Grafia had toned down her phrasing as much as possible, a quick mental translation turned it into a single, blunt statement. Your sister got done, and she was the one who took the initiative. One might venture that had the second part not revealed Rias's own willingness, Surzex could have ended up hardening something other than just his brow. Like swinging a fist, maybe. Getting with a Satan's little sister requires some nerve, indeed. After listening to Grafia's report, Surzex was silent for half a minute. Then he lowered his fork and knife, closed his eyes, and massaged his temples. Grafia, so you're saying it was only after you arrived on the scene that the other party went all out, hooking up with Rias in that way? Yes, Your Majesty. Recalling the situation in that hotel room, the silver-haired maid's expression wavered, too. At that time, it seemed Lady Rias had given up on her original plan the instant she realized I was there. Instead, this boat Keycane, once he heard my message, decided to engage in that with her, leading to MMPH. I get it. Raising a hand to silence her, Surzex pressed his other palm against his forehead as if battling a migraine. He rarely showed this side of himself. Not even in those earliest days of taking up the Satan's seat had he appeared so distressed. But how else could one react? It was all just too explosive. He felt like his CPU was overheated for the first time in his life. Off to the side, Venelana, who had also listened, looked more intrigued than upset. Oh, so that boy named Bo Keycane is Rias's own choice? Do we have any pictures? I'd like a look. Sadly, there were no photographs, though I can extract a recorded memory via magic, just from that conversation he and I had. Grafia's fingertips flickered with a magical glow. She hadn't finished when Surzex again lifted his hand to stop her. Better not. If Mother really wants to see it, do it separately, but I'll pass. I need to figure out how to handle this. Yes. Showing her understanding, Grafia circled behind Venelana, out of Surzex's line of sight, and opened a magical screen to begin playing the memory. Sigh. The young Satan sighed inwardly. He'd had scarcely any time to process the shock before forcibly calming down. Now that the facts were out, the first conclusion was that Rias's engagement to the Phoenix family was definitely off. That wasn't a big deal, honestly. Since Rias apparently disliked that Phoenix third son from the start, they'd have refused anyway. This just meant it was because her affections lay elsewhere, rather than some pure clash of Gremory, Phoenix politics. If anything, that eased the argument that the Gremory side didn't hold personal ill will toward Phoenix. Hence, the only question left, what about this Bo Keycane? With that, Surzex turned to the silver-haired maid behind him, who was now quietly showing the recording to his mother. Grafia, what's your impression of that Bo Keycane? Grafia paused. Summarizing any single person in a few words wasn't easy, but Boke's image felt unexpectedly straightforward to her. If I had to put it in one line, I'd call him someone who persists unwaveringly in his own will. Someone who persists in his will. That didn't surprise Surzex. Based on Grafia's initial report, He already held a general impression of Boke. His question merely sought confirmation. Given that, hearing from Grafia now fit perfectly. Because first, Boke didn't back down even after learning Rias was engaged to a fellow from the 72 Pillars, forging a relationship with her anyway. That alone showed his unstoppable conviction. Second, even after hearing Grafia's warning about reporting to the Phoenix family, he showed zero fear, indicating a firm confidence in his own strength. Third, he'd had Grafia relay a message urging Phoenix not to try underhanded tactics, suggesting he was at least bold and candid. Surzex's throbbing headache felt slightly soothed. At that moment, from her seat, Venelana sounded quite pleased. Rias actually picked well. He's quite the handsome boy, apparently. Got a great physique, too. The way he held Rias on the bed, talking to her, gave off a lovely sense of safety. So he's good-looking, too? Surzex mused to himself. Of course, as a top-tier Satan from one of the 72 Pillars, he tended not to fixate on someone's mere appearance. But living beings, devils included, were innately drawn to beauty. If the prospective partner looked decent, so much the better. Reaching that thought, Surzex decided, all right, in that case, I'll personally visit the Phoenix family to smooth things over, then tell Rias the outcome. Been a while since I saw her anyway. Chapter 42, Rias's Peerage. Scene shift, the next afternoon, Occult Research Club, Old Schoolhouse. After a one-day pause in club activities, the sofas in the reception room had returned to their usual arrangement. Aquino and Kaneko, currently sipping on milk tea, sat on the left couch, while Asia and Bo Kikane took the one on the right. Rias stood at the desk in front of them, rather than sitting with everyone, her arms folded atop the desk, leaning forward. Seeing that everyone was present, the red-headed girl clapped her hands. First off, after yesterday's short break, starting today, our Occult Research Club will resume normal club activities. Asia raised her hand timidly. Is the president's health all right now? Yesterday, I saw Aquino Senpai send Boke a message saying you weren't feeling well. If it's okay, I could use Twilight Healing to heal you. Thank you for your concern, Asia, but I'm fine, Rias replied with a gentle smile, aware of the sincerity in Asia's tone. If all goes well, I should be fully recovered by tomorrow, or at the latest the day after tomorrow. The not feeling well line from yesterday's text had been a hasty excuse. Though once evening rolled around, it wasn't just an excuse, but actual discomfort. After all, it had been her first time, and that certain someone hadn't held back. He'd almost burst the maximum admission quota of her baby's home in one session. Rias vaguely remembered reading in a school biology textbook that a normal human male's capacity each time was around 3 to 5 milliliters. But in terms of her experience from last night, Boke's output clearly surpassed that. A rough estimate would add a 0 behind that range. Thankfully, devils had sturdier physiques compared to humans. Otherwise, a more fragile girl like Asia, perhaps, might have gotten completely broken. Next time, have Boke take protective measures. She grumbled shyly in her heart. But then again, the usual commercial raincoats on the market were made for typical human capacity. If you throw 30 or 50 milliliters inside it all in one go. Ugh! While it might not literally explode, it'd inflate like a water balloon. Then you'd have to remove it afterward. Yikes, that seemed even more hassle. Might as well just let her belly get full and save the money. No point in using something that wouldn't help. These thoughts had Rias drifting off, her eyes aimlessly unfocused, cheeks flushing a bit. 3 or 4 seconds passed. Finally, Boke, who could no longer stand by, cleared his throat. So, you covered the first item of business. What's next? Huh? All right. Rias snapped out of it at the sound of his voice. Realizing she'd spaced out right in the middle of speaking, her cheeks heated up again. For a moment, she fumbled. Sorry about that. The second matter is, well, it's about my relationship with Boke. The moment she said that, the body of Aquino, seated on the left couch, shook slightly. She'd remained motionless and silent, showing no expression up until now. Though the tremor was small, in a nearly empty reception area, it was still noticeable. "What is it, Aquino?" Rias asked, sending her friend a curious glance. "Sorry, it's nothing." Aquino shook her head quietly, lowering a bit, unlike her usual style of tying her sleek black hair high in a ponytail, leaving only the bangs around her forehead free. Today she'd done a rougher job, letting the hair and back mingle with her front locks. It obscured her face so that no one could easily see her expression. Rias hovered there a moment, waiting to see if Aquino would say more. When she didn't, Rias continued. "Well then, concerning Boke and me, how should I put it? Basically, we formally started going out yesterday evening." She announced the last part quickly, breezing over it as if it were something trivial. Even so, an embarrassing flush tinted her cheeks the instant she'd spelled it out in front of her friends. As soon as those words left Rias's mouth, Asia, sitting next to Boke, gasped with wide eyes and parted lips. Kaneko also blinked in surprise, her golden gaze widening enough that the milk tea straw she'd been nibbling slipped from her mouth. Realizing something, she swiftly turned toward Aquino. Though the girl's long hair concealed most of her features, Kaneko could still make out those pale, slightly chapped lips pressed together. Rias also took note, but she went on anyway. "As you all know, I'm of the Gremory clan, heir to one of the 72 pillars, and my father, Zeoticus Gremory, once set a marriage pact with the Phoenix family under pressure from our lineage. But now that I've established a personal relationship with Boke, pledging ourselves, in essence, my engagement to Phoenix is effectively void. That said, the Phoenix family may very well seize on this as an excuse to cause trouble. So we might have a conflict?" Kaneko gently set aside her milk tea to ask in a quiet voice. Rias shook her head. "It's unclear yet. Yesterday, I simply asked Grafioani-sama to convey the news back to the underworld. The method of resolving it isn't decided. But if that rumored third son of the Phoenix family is as pompous as they say, the odds are..." VRRN. She was cut off mid-sentence by a sudden magical ripple in the air, familiar from many times before. A glowing sigil bearing the Gremory crest manifested in the space near them, swiftly forming a teleportation circle. A flash of red illuminated the circle, and a tall figure clad in red materialized. Kaneko and Aquino shot up from the couch, bowing respectfully at once. Simultaneously, Rias let out an astonished cry of recognition. "Oni-sama." It was only then that Boke turned his attention to the new arrival. "Huh, her brother?" So that meant the newly arrived man was none other than Surzex Lucifer, one of the 4 great Satans. Chapter 43 Rias. It's over. It was entirely unexpected. Nobody foresaw that Lucifer, ruler of nearly the entire underworld, would suddenly appear at this moment. Even Rias, his younger sister, couldn't help her startled reaction. She rose abruptly from her seat at the desk. "B brother? Why would you come here all of a sudden in GGH?" She hadn't finished her sentence before she sucked in a breath. A moment earlier, she'd been leaning against the desk, mainly to conserve energy and relieve the strain on her body. Now, this abrupt movement tugged at the muscles in her lower abdomen, still not fully recovered from yesterday afternoon's injuries, and a powerful ache shot through her. Her instinctive motion to clutch her stomach did not escape Surzex's notice. The young Satan's brow twitched subtly, but years of public office had taught him never to let emotions show. With a light, casual smile, Surzex said, "It's been a while, Rias, and to the rest of you Rias's servants as well." Lord Lucifer, Aquino, and Kaneko, seated near the sofa, had shot upright from the very first moment he arrived, bowing respectfully. Asia, though unsure how exactly to address him, still rose with a polite dip of her head. Rias realized she should probably introduce them, never mind her own astonishment. "Oh, brother, let me introduce you. This is Asia Argento. She used to be a holy maiden of the Northern European Church, but for certain reasons, she's left them. At the moment, she's, well, I suppose you could say a friend of ours." "A friend, is it? That's fine." Surzex nodded with a faint smile. He didn't wait for Rias to continue listing off names, though. He turned his gaze toward the boy still sitting calmly on the sofa. "Hello there. I'm Rias's brother, Surzex Gremory." "Hello." Only then did Boke Kikane stand, his voice collected. "I'm Boke of the Kyoto-based Kikane clan. I'm the acting representative. Currently, I'm going out with your sister." "The Kikane clan, is it? Grafie has already mentioned you to me." Their eyes met as Surzex returned a polite smile. "She said your clan is an ancient line of Onmyoji in the human world. But from what I can see, you don't resemble the typical Onmyoji at all." Which was accurate enough. Throughout history, Onmyoji were often portrayed as refined, talisman-wielding paper mages or summoners, usually physically delicate types. Yet Boke gave off the impression of a brawny martial artist, relying on his fists alone to break through any foe. That's probably because I went against the mainstream from a young age," Boke said with an indifferent shrug. "But it's no big deal. If you can beat the other guy, that's all that matters." A practical approach, that's not bad. Apparently finding the idea agreeable, Surzex chuckled. Rias, who had been standing off to the side as they spoke, finally seized the opportunity to speak. "Brother, what brings you here so suddenly?" The young red-haired Satan paused. "Well, obviously, for your future. I already heard about you and Boke from Grafia just last night." Ugh. The mention of last night made Rias's expression freeze up again. After all, in that hotel suite at dusk, while Boke took the lead physically, she was definitely the one who let herself get carried away, so much so that she completely forgot Grafia was right outside. She couldn't even recall what she herself might have said during the process. If Grafia had reported all that to her brother, Rias. "But you needn't worry too much, Rias." Seeing his sister's face turn more and more uneasy, Surzex's own tone softened, albeit with a note of exasperated indulgence. "When Grafia told me yesterday, Mother was there in the room as well. What?" It was as though someone had smacked her with a wooden mallet. Rias's mouth hung open, her entire body going pale, with spiderweb cracks forming in her mind's eye. So not just her brother. Mother knew, too? In that moment, Rias realized her image within the family was pretty much done for. "Still, I think Mother seemed pretty supportive of you," Surzex added. Rias felt her internal meltdown abruptly vanish, replaced by incredulous surprise as she lifted her gaze. "Supportive?" Mother said, "What exactly?" "Nothing much. The gist is, she's quite satisfied with Boke," Surzex recalled. "Then she told me, if you really want to reject the Phoenix engagement, I should lend a hand. Let her brother help." For a fraction of a second, Rias's newly forming smile froze. "So you, that's why I'm here." The young Satan offered his sister a small grin. "I do understand how you feel, Rias. That's why, before coming here, I first want to see the Phoenix family to explain the situation, and then I came straight over. Put simply, you'll have to negotiate with them yourselves to finalize a resolution. You're okay with that, right?" He flicked his wrist, calling forth a large magical screen. Across the front, an image read, "Awaiting connection." Rias nodded vigorously. "Of course, that's exactly what we want. After all, it was her and Boke's affair. She'd prefer to settle it directly, not just rely on her brother's influence." A moment later, as the sofa near the side of the room was moved to face the screen, the words "awaiting connection" morphed into "connecting." The five, Rias, Boke, Aquino, Asia, and Kaneko, gathered on one couch, which wasn't quite cramped but forced Boke to the center. Rias and Aquino sat on either side of him, with Asia and Kaneko on the outer spots, arranged by height. Meanwhile, Surzex took a seat opposite them, effectively placing him between the magical display and the group, like a referee perched on a high chair at a tennis match. The official negotiation was about to begin. Chapter 44, Riser, Phoenix Rage Quit. The process of connecting was similar to making a video call on a smartphone. No one knew whether the underworld had signal towers, but Boke Kikane didn't much care about the magical mechanics behind such a video feed. As long as they could connect, that was enough. Sure enough, after a few seconds of connecting, text on the magical display, the words changed to "connection successful," and the other side's image appeared. Though it was magic-based, the clarity was on par with cutting-edge human tech. On the screen was a blond young man sitting on a sofa in a lavish residence. He had one leg crossed over the other and lightly swirled a glass of red wine in his hand. Despite also being blonde, his hair was more of a brassy gold than Asia's gentle, almost holy shade. The center spike of his forelock and the deliberately open shirt collar, revealing some solid pecs, evoked the image of a strutting little rooster. Ah, looks like we're connected. It's been a while, Rias. He raised his wine glass with a mischievous grin. No need to call my name so familiarly. Seeing the man's flashy attitude and recalling how she'd once been engaged to him, Rias couldn't help the trace of disgust that crept onto her face. Her voice turned colder by the moment. Riser Phoenix. It was uncommon for Rias to address people by their full name. Usually she'd use either a given name or surname alone. Using both like this was an unmistakable gesture of rejection. Riser seemed to notice her hostility, but he only shrugged as if unbothered. Hey now, no need for the frosty reception. We do have an engagement. No sense acting at each other's throats from the get-go, right? Well, either way, I need to thank Lord Lucifer for granting this chance at mediation. So saying, he stood up in the video feed, bowing towards Surzex, who was perched on the couch from this end, and then, on receiving a nod, plopped back down. All right, so let's get to the point about our engagement, Rias. Great. I was just about to talk about that. Rias sat upright, slightly nudging closer to Boke at her side. Her tone was calm, but resolute. Riser Phoenix, our so-called betrothal, was nothing more than an arrangement between our fathers. Even my father had no right to decide my life. But at the same time, the Gremory clan isn't unreasonable. I, Rias Gremory, as heir, can assure you we'll offer an appropriate compensation within reason. Rias's words were firm and resonant, confirming her legitimate grounds for refusing the marriage, while also acknowledging that the Gremory side, technically, was the one breaking it. She made it clear they'd give reparation for that breach, an approach worthy of Gremory's future head. From his seat, Surzex couldn't help but show a small, proud smile at his sister's skillful negotiation. But then, compensation? It was like Riser had just heard the funniest joke in the world. His shoulders trembled lightly as he let out a laugh. Rias, you still don't seem to grasp your family situation here. You can't just refuse and expect it to end with a single no, I don't want it. Don't you get that? But never mind. I'll name my price now. He paused briefly, gaze shifting from Rias to Boke, positioned at the center of the sofa. The corners of his mouth twisted in a cruel, predatory smirk. Rias, I want you to kill that little nobody you picked up in the human world, right in front of me. Then you'll come immediately back to the underworld and marry me. In that case, I'll pretend none of this ever happened. Good deal, no? Riser Phoenix, don't you dare go too far. All semblance of calm dissolved in an instant. Rias slammed her hand on the table, jabbing a finger at the screen in fury. The red aura of power of destruction flared up around her, stirring her scarlet hair as if blown by a fierce wind. But the next second, a hand from beside her settled on her shoulder. That familiar, solid warmth washed away her rage and tension in a blink. Boke patted her shoulder, gently urging her back down to the couch, then rose himself, walking unhurriedly to stand before the large screen. He spoke with a faint air of condescension. When people negotiate, it's to find an outcome both sides can accept. But from your attitude, there's nothing to discuss. That's fine. Rias wants to handle this diplomatically, but I don't. If there's no talking to be done, we'll fight. 3 concise sentences, effectively shattering what little remained of the negotiation's fragile atmosphere. Even Surzex, who'd stayed silent so far, arched an eyebrow in mild surprise. What a negotiation whiz. As for Riser, the mocking grin he'd worn vanished. His face darkened, eyes narrowing dangerously. You realize what you're saying? Human. Fuck off. Boke didn't even let him finish. The terse, forceful words made the gold-haired man's eyes flash with bloodshot veins. But he controlled his temper quickly, forcibly stifling it. Fine, fine. So be it. Or then Rias Gremory, Bring all your servants. We'll settle this in a rating game. Click. He ended the call on his side, the magical screen flickering before plunging into darkness. Huh. So that was basically a rage quit. Out of curiosity, Bo glanced at Surzex on the side sofa. Seems the other party cut the line. Surzex rose from the couch, walking to the empty screen. Well, the outcome's a bit unexpected, but in some sense the negotiation served its purpose. And since a rating game was proposed, you all need to decide the location for your match. Though outwardly addressing the entire group, he kept his eyes mostly on Boke. In the underworld, the Phoenix Estate. Boke's answer was succinct. Very well. Chapter 45 Rias has also been planted with a switch. By the time Surzex left, they'd already confirmed the time and location for the battle. After all, being the Satan, he was not only tied down by official business, but also had to maintain the neutrality of a realm administrator. Even though he was backing his sister, he couldn't participate in tactical discussions or actual combat itself. Scene shift, back in the old schoolhouse. With Surzex gone, only Rias, Boke Keycane, and their companions remained. The furniture in the reception room had reverted to its usual arrangement. On the right sofa, Rias sat next to Boke, wearing a somewhat serious expression. Now that we know the results of the negotiation, she said, the next thing is to decide how we'll handle what comes next. From Boke's other side, Asia timidly raised her hand. Are we preparing for a fight with them? Yes. Though we never wanted this outcome, Rias replied with a nod. It's obvious from the other side's attitude that conflict was inevitable from the start. The two sides had entirely different goals. Rias wanted a peaceful resolution if possible, both parties stepping back, with Phoenix softening its stance while Gremory gave suitable reparations. But the Phoenix side had shown zero interest in real negotiations, using talks more like a tool to pressure the Gremory family. Hence, battle was the only choice. In a sense, Boke's provocative words simply sped up the process, avoiding any prolonged tug-of-war. Whatever. There's nothing to stress about, Boke remarked. Compared to Rias, who looked visibly concerned, he seemed utterly unbothered, lounging in the couch, hands shoved in his pockets. It's just meeting them for a brawl, right? Whoever's got the heavier fists wins. It's not that simple. Rias's forehead twitched. This life or death. Who cares? Let's fight. Attitude gave her mixed feelings of anger and exasperation. No matter how you looked at it, the Phoenix family was one of the 72 pillars in the underworld, an ancient pure-blood devil clan with formidable strength. Sighing, she raked a hand through her crimson hair. The main issue is this so-called rating game. All right. Boke recalled that near the end of their video call, that roast chicken guy had rattled on about a rating game. He'd essentially tuned out everything as rubbish talk at the time. Tell me what's special about it, he said. Rias took a moment to gather her thoughts. The rating game is basically still a fight, but it's an official system designed by one of my brother's friends, also a Satan, named Ajuka Beelzebub. It goes along with the retainer system I mentioned before. In a rating game, the king leads their queen, bishop, knight, rook, and so forth, up to 14 total, to battle an opposing team. But right now, I only have Kaneko, Aquino, and myself as capable fighters. Meanwhile, Riser Phoenix already has 16 retainers. Great. We got the upper hand. Boke quipped, sounding eager to fight. You be serious. Rias pressed 2 fingers into his side, intending to twist him, then thinking better of it, gave him a light poke. The problem is the retainer system. You're not my servant. You're not even a devil. What? So you gotta be a devil to play. Boke frowned. Well, I'm not entirely sure, Rias admitted with a small cough. To my knowledge, these games only occur in the underworld, so bringing in external allies, especially humans, has no precedent. Doesn't matter. Boke shrugged again. If they won't let me join, I'll just flatten the Phoenix territory with one stomp. Then even if the rules don't allow it, so what? They'll have no recourse left. Why you? Ria's free hand went to her forehead. She could picture how that might pan out. Like if people were quietly playing chess on a park stone table, and you flew in with a vicious high kick that sent the board flying, then spat on them and slapped them. No one was playing anymore. You'd force them into a real fight right then. Anyway, don't worry so much. Just leave it to me. Boke slid an arm around her waist. I can handle all of them alone, single-handedly. Her face heated at his casual assurance. It was natural to plan together, but his gestures could be so distractingly intimate. Whoa. Suddenly, Rias's body gave a subtle tremor, and she sat up straighter. What was that? Perhaps no one else saw anything unusual, but Rias was acutely aware of her own body and the faint current that ran through her just then. What's wrong, Rias? Sensing the restless movement at her waist, Boke asked curiously. Nothing, she whispered, cheeks flushing. Your arm just felt kind of uncomfortable pressed into my side. And Aquino's watching, you know. Oh, sorry. Without protest, Boke withdrew his arm from her back. Freed from that contact, Rias felt that teasing, tingly wave subside. She managed a small exhale and continued. So next, about our trip back to the underworld, she trailed off in hesitation. Living among humans for so long made her almost unconsciously think we should find a hotel, but the underworld's political climate made that idea absurd. She was Grimmery's heiress. Not using her own estate upon returning would be bizarre, and everyone would notice her presence anyway. Which meant no messing around, straight to her family home. Which basically means meeting the parents. She thought, somewhat nervously. At length, Rias lifted her head again. Boke, Aquino, we'll need to prepare some gifts before heading back to the underworld. That task is yours.